If we got anything. Okay. And yeah, it seems like I can finally be heard. Alright, this is David again. This is going to be a game analysis of my round two game. So, yes, round two. The first game, if you didn't see it, I'll post a link in the description. And this is, of course, at the Emory Chess Grand Prix tournament. So, yes, don't mind the screen. I'm going to make a real quick check to make sure everything's good. Okay, audio seems fine. All's well. So, I was facing a guy named Jonathan Raspberry. Apparently, he's from Alabama, so I heard. He's rated nearly about 2100. And yeah, I had no idea who this guy was. I was playing the black pieces. This had a nice, calm round one win, so I was I didn't really know what to expect, but I was still ready to play. Happy out my first game. So without further ado, let's get into it. By the way, this game gets pretty insane towards the end, so yeah, get your seatbelts ready. Alright, so he opened with c4. I know what you're thinking. Okay, c4, one of the most boring moves you can possibly open with. Hold on, let me turn this engine off. But yeah, c4. It's called in English, known for pretty dull positions. Generally, some positional type players like to play this. Okay, but I don't really think it ever leads to much for white. So okay, I play c5. This is the symmetrical English. Knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, g6 here, bishop g7 here, and now comes the first finesse. I play knight h6. And I wrote in my annotation that this is an interesting idea that frustrates some English players. The idea is to prevent d4. The bishop's uncaged. As you can see, this doesn't block in the bishop, so I have the bishop on d4. And later, after e3 is played, the knight can hop to f5 and also help prevent d4. So this is a good way to sometimes confuse the English players a little bit. And, you know, I like this. I like this a lot. I think black gets pretty good play and, you know, kind of messes with white's ideas because white often likes to go for a quick d4. So he castled, I castled, and then he played b3. And this really was not a move I'd seen before. I mean, I'm sure it's probably playable. I mean, after all, it's the English. I could probably even play b6 here and it'd be fine. But I just decided to continue with the normal symmetrical English plan. I'm going for b5. Um, Going for b5 is generally a good idea, or b4. White often tries to go for b4 because assuming that the other side captures your b pawn, they'll have one pawn taken away from the center. Like if you can imagine if the c pawn were to capture my b pawn after going in b5, I'd gain control of the d5 square. So he played bishop b2, and now I played a move that I kind of regretted. At the moment, I thought it was okay. I'll be honest, I'm not. This is my first time playing in English in a tournament game, even this line in a tournament game, for instance. And I was not. I know how to play Englishes, but at the same time, I'm not like super familiar with everything. So I knew b5 was good if allowed. Normally, actually, after a6 or even a3, the opponent will respond with a5 or say a4. Like they'll immediately try to stop it. So seeing that he didn't stop it, and I saw that b5 was tactically possible right now, I decided it was probably a good idea to go ahead and play b5. But I ended up thinking this was actually a little bit premature due to White's response. And White responded with takes, and then d4, striking in the center. So I played on the wing, he played immediately in the center. And I didn't think this move was possible for some reason, but after looking at it, apparently it was. And I had the option of going into this line over here, in which case I could take, he would take, and then I could play e5. But the passed pawns in the long run look a little bit scary. Black does gain complete control of the center, but I won't lie, for whatever reason in my calculations, when I saw this position, I was just assuming he was getting the pawn back. I don't know, but for whatever reason, the move e5 didn't even pop into my head. But yes, e5 is playable. However, like I said, the two passed pawns um, would be a little bit annoying in the future. All that being said, though, I still probably may have gone for this if I would have noticed this simple continuation. But I had another idea that was interesting. So in this position, I actually got a little bit worried because I was like, okay, I felt that I couldn't take on d4 because I wasn't calculating far enough. And I don't know, just a whole bunch of options didn't look that great for me. So I decided to give an exchange, but I felt that I had decent compensation. So I played b4, knight a4, and then I played rook takes a4. So cool thing about English is, let's go forward a little bit, takes and then c4, is that since there's so many pawns on the board, sometimes sacking an exchange isn't the worst idea, or I'll say it doesn't hurt you as much as it normally would. Here I don't even have a pawn for the exchange. However, you'll notice there are no open lines for the rooks to really function on. And for that reason, being down the exchange actually isn't the worst thing in the world here. I'll even flick on the engine for a second and allow you to see that after some thinking, it's currently saying white's doing good. But if you let the engine sit for a little bit, it'll come close to the conclusion that actually white's not dominating. Like a point 4 advantage is definitely a slight pull for white. Now it's getting even closer to equal. But it's starting to lean to basically saying that black is completely fine in this position. And I did agree that even though this wasn't optimal, black did have some good fighting chances. You can imagine the pawn getting to c3, and my bishop becoming pretty strong on the diagonal, and also just I knew there was no rooks. Rooks basically weren't going to hurt me. Like I didn't see any way for rooks to really start hurting me. And so yeah. So here my opponent played knight e5, and I didn't like this move. I thought this move I gave it a dubious symbol because I don't know, it just seemed wrong. Like for one, if I take on e5, it creates a weakness on e5 that I could attack, and the computer even just suggested computer even suggested just playing c3 here, and even just going for this. And yeah, even this position looks pretty darn active. I mean, pretty active for black. I think black has wonderful compensation here. And yeah, instead of knight e5 though, I was expecting him to play e4. This is the move I was more afraid of, because when it takes away the f5 square from my knight, and it just puts a pawn in the center, prevents me from playing d5. Play could have continued e6, let's say rook b1 and then d5. This is what I was thinking about going for, in which case I think it's pretty obvious that black has decent compensation here. While I'm not going to say black is better, I think it's definitely a fighting game. The exchange sack is at least sound. Anyway, I took the knight, took back, and then I played c3 because my problem here was there were many lines where the queen could harass my two advanced pawns. I was having trouble defending them because the queen could come to a square like d4 or d5 and immediately start attacking them. So I played c3, back to bishop up, and then queen a5. And yeah, this actually wasn't the best move, but to be completely honest, this position right here is actually kind of tricky to play. It's not too obvious how black should proceed, and black kind of has to walk on a fine line in order to not just have his pawns completely destroyed and, his advantage gone. I was looking at lines with knight g4, but things like queen d4 scared me off of those lines, so I didn't really pursue them as far. Or, not queen d4, but queen d5, I think. Anyway, so c3, bishop backed up, and then queen a5. So my plan was that, this kind of prevents him from playing queen to d5, attempting to trade off queens, because I can play queen takes a4. So that's why I played c3. Because if you notice back here, if I play queen a5, then he can play queen d5, hitting my c4 pawn. So c3 here. And yeah, the game continues. He played rook b1. So I think rook b1 was definitely not the right way to continue. I was actually pretty worried about him actually playing this move a3. And I think a3 was the way to go because it attempts to break up my pawns. Here I was planning on pushing past, because even though it seems like I'm just sacrificing a pawn, which I am, I think it's very important to keep this bishop off that a3 to f8 diagonal. I do not think it's worth keeping a pawn. Those double pawns are still doubled. It's only going to be one passed pawn in the long runners. Basically, I just have to block the a file, but if I allow the bishop to the a3, f8 diagonal, I'm going to be in trouble. So b3, queen takes here, and then something like bishop f4 perhaps. Play could continue with like queen takes e2, rook over, queen h5, rook takes, knight g4 here and then here. This is a computer line, but this just shows that black can actually still get some pretty active play from this position. And again, just showing that this exchange sack, it allows black's pieces to get some decent play. This pawn on c3 is always a bother. My bishop on g7's unopposed, and my pieces are very active. Anyway, so after rook b1, he was threatening to play queen b3 and simply pick up my pawn, so I just developed bishop a6. He allowed me to develop, why not? Now if queen b3, I have the option of playing rook b8. Here queen takes d7 isn't exactly optimal because I can play bishop takes e2, so he played queen c2. And again, I think he should have gone for a3 here, just trying to break up my pawns. Again, I would have pushed past and allow his dark squared bishop to get active. He may have played rook takes, queen takes, bishop f4, and then just queen c5, maybe queen takes d7, and knight f5. Threatening the e2 pawn, and again, I think black has decent compensation here. Again, my pieces are very active, and that pawn on c3 is a monster, as well as my bishop's a monster. My knight could come to d4. I think there's a few things for black to be happy about, but again, still probably close to equal. Maybe white has the slight advantage. Okay, so after queen c2, I played knight f5, getting my knight in the game. This now allows me to take the e5 pawn with my bishop. Previously, if I took with my bishop, the knight on h6 would have hanged. So now with the knight coming to f5, I'm threatening to play knight to d4. And so I'm happy that now my knight's back in the game. That's one more piece I have to work with. He played rook d1, stopping knight d4. Now I just scooped the pawn. And after rook d5, just came back and played queen to c7. And rook takes b4. So even though I've lost my two pawns on the queen side that were kind of like marching forward. I still have a really nice grip on the position. Both of my bishops are doing a great job. They're both really active. They look better than white's rooks. My knight's doing a good job coordinating with my dark squared bishop. My queen's coordinating with my dark squared bishop. The nice pawn on c3, holding down play. White's light squared bishop doesn't have much play. So I still think that black has decent compensation. Flicking on the engine again, if we let it sit for a while, you can see the engine's getting closer. Well, it says about 0.5, yeah, but you'll see the engine pretty much levels off at around equal. Very slight pull for white, but again, technically I'm down a whole exchange, not even a pawn for the exchange, and it's still giving me about an equal position. So here I played e6, rook back, and then something happened that this almost didn't happen the entire tournament. I had a complete blind spot, and I straight up blundered here, just made a blunder. So I really wanted to play knight to d4. That was like my main goal, knight to d4. And his rook on b4 and his rook on d1 are currently stopping that. So I decided to play bishop to c4 with the idea of now, again, renewing the threat of knight to d4. And my opponent saw that and played e3. But what we both missed, because I gave bishop c4 and e3 both double question marks, is that there was the very simple move of rook b1. Rook b7, excuse me. Rook b7 was in the position, and yeah, this is just bad for black. After queen c8, rook takes, knight b4 is still stopped. I mean, white just got a free pawn for no reason. His rooks are doubled on the d-file. I mean, my bishops still look nice. I can still try to fight, but this is just much better for white. White is definitely in the driver's side, almost even winning, if not winning. So yeah, this was something we both missed, and it was actually surprising. So yeah, he played e3, and here I was happy with my position. I just went d5. And the funny point is, actually, in this position, I noticed that rook b7 was a threat, and I didn't notice that I'd even missed it during the game. I was just like, okay, well, now he's starting rook b7. Probably should stop that. So d5, and then he played bishop f1. I don't know too much about this idea. I don't know if it was the greatest. My bishop on c4 was a monster, and his bishop was doing nothing, so I can see why he'd go for it. However, this does leave his king weaker than it was in the before, after takes. And you might think, okay, why in the world would you even talk about a king? I mean, look at the position. Both kings are moderately safe. There's definitely no attacks going on. But I just keep watching, okay? Even things as simple as losing that being shadowed bishop over there, you always have to look for chances after those bishops are gone. So, okay, he played king takes. I thought it was kind of strange, but okay, it makes sense keeping his rook on the d-file. I played knight to d6, and I think it's become extremely obvious that black has really nice compensation. White's position just doesn't even look that fun to play. His rooks are, I don't know what they're doing. His bishop's on c1. His queen's blockading a pawn. Meanwhile, I have a dominating bishop on e5. My queen on c7 is doing good work. My knight on d6 can jump to either c4 or e4. Both scores look great. And I haven't even started using my other rook yet. So he's not even in the game. So, okay, he just brought the king back. It's an okay move. Probably had to be done eventually. And I played h5. So now I started my launch on the king side. The light squared bishop is gone. Therefore, this structure is weak. Whenever you have the structure, h2, g3, f2, always a good idea to push h5. Well, almost always a good idea. Like, if you're looking for something to do, chances are pushing h5, h4 is a good idea. Because in some lines, you can take on g3 twice, and the structure is just weak. You can imagine later, like a queen-bishop battery could sack, and then maybe you have perpetuals or mating attack. Or there are other times you can push the pawn from h4 to h3, and then that pawn can become a dangerous tool in the endgame, creating mating nets. And you'll also have ideas of once the pawn's in h3, bringing your rook back to the back rank, checking the king runs somewhere, and then you play rook h1 and get the h2 pawn. Now that's a queening pawn. So it's a very good idea often to attack that structure, and that's what I started doing. Okay, so he played bishop a3, activating his bishop. I really don't want to lose that knight, so I played rook to c1, overprotecting the c-pawn. Often when you're getting ready to attack, it's a very good idea to overprotect your weaknesses, because you're going to need your pieces to come towards the king, so it's a good idea to have more than enough pieces protecting your weakness. That way, when you start devoting your weaknesses to the actual king, you'll still have some pieces on your weaknesses. So currently I have 3 pieces protecting that pawn, and there's only 1 to attack her, but that's going to come in handy later. Okay, so he brought his rook back to b1. It became apparent that he wanted to play bishop to b4, and here I played knight e4, just jumping into the position. So now every single one of my pieces is protecting that c3 pawn, which is super overprotection, but I mean, why not? And again, to me, white's position just looks relatively passive. I definitely like black here. And yeah, I play black any day here. So he played bishop b4. And due to my overprotection, again, I don't even have to worry. This was pretty much a free move for me. Bishop b4, like I said, all my pieces are protecting. This literally does nothing, so I continue on with my attack. h4, really like this move. Jumping forward, getting into position. Taking on h4 isn't really an idea. And if allowed, I'm going to take on h3. I might play king g7 and rook h8. I might sack. There's a bunch of things that I could possibly do. Like if he did nothing, let's say he played rook b3. Let's put this on the board. You can imagine takes, 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 takes. I don't know, queen g2, I guess. And takes. And this actually would look like something similar to the game. So, yeah, interesting stuff. So after bishop b4, I played h4. He played f4. So this move was actually a little bit too much. He shouldn't have played this move, and it wasn't really a good response. Not sure what the best response would have been, but I just know this one wasn't that good. I could have retreated and just played bishop f6, and then maybe he would have played g4. But for some reason, I thought maybe his pawn could get to g5 one day, and then he'd have a lot of space on the king side. And we were getting very low on time. We both had about 7 to 10 minutes on our clocks at this point. But I immediately saw a tactic that popped up at me, and I couldn't resist. So I played h takes g3, and I really liked this move. I gave a double exclamation mark. This move really puts the question to white, and it also really highlights the fact that white has overextended on the king side. The first point is you notice that if you take this bishop, that I can take on h2. And notice that queen takes h2 is impossible because I just have the nice move c2, forking the rooks. And if king takes, I will take on e5 with check. So let's imagine king h1, and then just queen takes e5. And if you look at this dominating knight on e4, if you look at this pawn that's ready to fork two rooks if the queen ever moves, if you look at all the knight checks that are possible, black's actually just winning here. Even though it looks like black's down a rook, black is completely winning here. I'll throw on the engine to prove it. Yeah, we're getting a plus 1.5, plus 1.7, minus 2. Even though we're down a rook, this is like completely winning because there's just too many threats. And yeah, white's not going to be able to parry them all. So yeah, that doesn't work. All right, so he didn't do this. He relatively quickly decided that that was not worth going into. He just recaptured. But now I decided to force the issue. I could have played bishop f6, and again, with his weaknesses on the king side, I still would have been better, much better actually, but I forced the issue. We both had low time, and I played the move that like everybody was like, what in the world? People watching the game kind of like joked about this sacrifice. So I played knight takes g3. And I think this was a double exclamation mark move for the situation. I gave an interesting symbol in the annotation, but for the actual situation that it was in, I think it was a double exclamation mark. Because this sacrifice is actually completely sound. I'll show you in a second that it's completely sound. And with time trouble, this is extremely hard to defend. Extremely hard to defend. The idea is quite simple. I'm basically trading a piece for 2 pawns. So I'm going to get his f pawn, and I'm going to get the g3 pawn. And I'm saying, hey, your king's completely open. Now, at the end of the day, I'm going to be down a rook. But his king's going to be wide open. I'm still going to have a protected fast pawn on c3 that's ready to run. And there's a loose bishop on b4. And they'll just be dangerous to his king. So there's nothing really else to do but to accept the sacrifice, and he did. I played queen takes c5. And so here, the funny thing is, after the game, everybody pretty much came up to me and they were like, wow, you got really lucky. You know, oh, you were losing. Like, wow, you were down a rook. Ha, you were losing. Man, what a swindle, man. Blah, blah. And I kept on saying, yeah, but, you know, maybe the engine would have found a defense, but practically it was pretty good. I kept on, yeah, but practically, and everybody's just, oh, wow, yeah, you got lucky. But switch on the engine, wait for it, look at it. Better for black. This position is equal or better for black. All right? You see a 0? Exactly. This is given just better for black. That's really all it is. The sacrifice is completely sound. And with it being completely sound and the time situation, I say by far best possible decision in the position to go for this. All right? So let's proceed. So far, so good. He played rook e1. And now the computer says the best way to continue is rook c4. But for whatever reason, we were getting low on time, and I just felt really weird about my back rank being open like that. I just didn't like the idea of my back rank being open, so I played king g7, which was my original idea, to swing the rook over to h8. It's not the most accurate, but it's definitely an idea. So he played rook c1. The interesting thing about this position is it's really hard for white to find a plan. Like, what does white really actually do? For instance, I just played knight e4 here. And the best way I could put it is white just simply needs to find a way to not get mated and not lose material. But when you're down a lot of time, that's a really hard plan to go for. Meanwhile, black's plan is very easy. I want to play rook h8, rook h5, rook g5, and just start attacking with the queen, a knight, and a rook with 0 pawns to protect the king and a passed pawn for him to deal with. And his bishop's completely out the game. So this position is just very hard to play as white because what do? So he did the first thing that looks kind of obvious. He's brought his queen into the defense, queen h2. I can't trade queens, so I played queen g5 here and then queen e5. So okay, he can repeat with queen h2, but being completely up a rook, I doubt that was the first thing on his priority list. So now I played, or he played rook c2. So again, very low on time. I think at this point we were both below 3 minutes, maybe even below 2 minutes, and we were having to make decisions really fast. People were starting to gather around the board because we were one of the last games going. It was intense, trust me. Okay, so his idea, he decided, hey, I'm going to double rooks, attack that pawn, because if that pawn falls and my king's in that diagonal and that bishop gets activated in that diagonal, I'm toast. But I was just in time for my counterplay. I played rook h8, he played rook c1, and now rook h5. So now bishop takes c3 doesn't work, because after bishop takes c3, knight takes c3, rook takes c3, I have rook g5 at the very end, and I'm getting the queen back. So that just does not work. So after rook h5, he played queen f3. Now, just so you guys can see, at this point you really can't blame either player for any of the moves going forward, missing a win or missing a perfect defense, because again, the position's ridiculously complicated. There's tactics all over the place. And like I said, again, you always want to be black in this position, always, because white's the one that's generally getting mated or like losing material. So this is always going to be black. But just for example, I'll just show you guys that a win was missed here, for instance. I had this move right here, knight g5. And just to show the line, let's say that he goes to e2, queen e2, protecting the pawn. Watch what happens. Just see how all the pieces coordinate. You have queen g3, queen g2, knight comes in, rook comes in, goodbye queen. Here, check, goodbye bishop, and goodbye pawn. Just an example of how all of black's pieces can quickly coordinate and the type of win that could have gone down. After knight g5 with queen g4, we have queen e3, rook down, and that's just a rook that I will take. And again, completely winning ending for black. So yeah, knight g5 would have sealed the deal, but I found another move that was also just as playable. I played rook f5, hitting the queen. And the problem now is that if the queen goes somewhere like, let's say, e2, then I had some move. Yeah, let's say the queen goes to e2, then I can play queen g2 check, and then this is forced, and then I come back over and I take the e3 pawn. And yeah, this is also going to be lights out. This is completely winning for white, or for black. So that was not possible. So he played queen h3, and again I had the ability to repeat. I could have played rook h5 here and asked a similar question, but instead I pushed forward and I played d4. And I remember we were both under a minute at this point. I had maybe 50 seconds left. And I remember he played queen h3 after rook f5. He had maybe like 40 seconds. And the second he played queen h3, I'd already seen it, just d4. And if you'll notice, white can't take on d4. If he takes on d4, his bishop on b4 drops. And now white would only be up in exchange. And only up in exchange in this position is quite obviously losing. So you just can't take the pawn. And all of a sudden, black went from seeming like he had no attack down a rook to now every single one of black's pieces is attacking, and it looks as if black's about to get a second pass pawn. So the position at this point is just completely crazy. We both have less than a minute. I got like 50 or 40 seconds. His time was ticking down. He got down to like maybe 30 seconds or something like that. So here he played rook h2, and then the craziness and the pressure, for whatever reason, I actually thought I was getting mated. I almost considered playing king f6, but then I saw my rook had come to h5, so I played rook g5 check, put his rook there, and then I played rook h5, which is making moves, and then just d3. I just kept pressing forward. And I'll just throw in the engine just to let you guys see what the evaluation is right here. Look at it. The engine says basically near equal. This position is complete chaos. Just complete chaos. It's now saying better for black. It's now saying much better for black. And I don't even know. I mean, I honestly, don't ask me what's going on here because I don't know. All I know is I was playing black. I was confident in my position, and I was just pressing forward. Again, low time, under a minute. Stakes were high. Everybody was tense. Spectators were gathering around. This was go time. This is why I play tournaments. Stuff like this. All right, so position's just insane right now. So, okay, right now, white spotted a tactic that I also spotted. And he played bishop takes, takes, takes. And white's idea is that if I take his rook, that he can take my rook on h5, and then I'll just be down a rook. But for one, let me show you the flaw with his plan, which I didn't play this in game, but it turns out my position is so strong that I actually can take his rook. After queen takes a5, I have queen a1 check, king h2, and then just d2, exclam. The problem is the rook can't take the pawn because the queen will hang, and I'm just threatening to queen my pawn. If he plays rook g1 to try to stop it, just queen takes g1, king takes g1, and we just take his queen at the end. So in other words, rook d1, take, boom, game over. So it turns out that didn't work, but I didn't see that during the game. The second he played rook takes c3, I had seen this variation in my head, and I immediately played rook f5, a move he was clearly not expecting. He paused, he seemed flustered. His time was ticking down. He had like, I don't know, his time went from like 30 to like 17, like he was ticking. You could clearly see there was an issue. And the problem is, for one, I already knew personally he had to take on f5. That was the only move. Queen c6 keeps the material, but I hadn't calculated anything, but I just knew if he played queen c6, he was getting mated one way or the other. And he thought about it. He was looking. You could tell he was like frustrated, like he missed this move, and then he played queen c6. And I just knew this lost by 4, so I immediately took on e3, came here, check, here, and I actually believe I repeated. I actually think I played rook g5 because I remember we had 10-second delay at the tournament. I remember glancing at my clock, and I saw the delay ticking down, like 5, 4, and I thought I was about to flag, so I immediately played rook g5, he played rook g2, and then I played black back, and he immediately played back. And then I looked at my clock again, and I saw, oh wait, you have like 45 seconds, so you have 35 seconds. I was like, oh, okay, I can try to calculate a mate from here. So I looked at the position, I looked at it, I looked at my time, looked back, and then I just started counting. And soon enough, I saw the mate. I saw that after queen check, here, rook check, here, rook check. And I think after this move, he actually resigned, because he resigned right when I played this last check, because he realized the next move would be checkmate. And so the king would come here, and then this would be game. And it would just be complete game over. And it was a really good finish. I felt nice finishing off the moves. Once you calculate it's a forced mate, you know it's over. You know you got it in the bag. It's just a great feeling. And right when I delivered that second to last move, he was the first moving the king really quickly, but then he saw it was over, just shook the hand, and then kind of like hit the table too. I mean, it was a really tense game. Like there was definitely emotion involved. Both of us were really stressed. Both of us were giving it our all. But yeah, the game was just insane. Hard to believe this all came from a symmetrical English of all openings. But yeah, so I guess just as a recap, this was the opposite of my round 1 game. My round 1 game was like a nice positional, exploit a small weakness. This game was just like, hey, sacrifice and exchange in the opening, all sorts of material imbalances, then sacrifice some more stuff, open up the king, bring your pieces in for the attack. Yeah, so we started off just as a game recap with this nice little line in the English. Stuff got a little bit messy over here, so we decided to give up an exchange, and we ended up getting a position where white did not take full advantage of his ability to break up my counterplay. I slid in and started activating my pieces. There was a blunder committed over here that was not taken advantage of, where rook b7 would have definitely put white in the driver's seat. And after this position, black clearly had a nice clamp. I think all of black's pieces are just beautiful. And then black just started launching an offensive. Just completely launched an offensive. Overprotected the c-pawn and then launched a complete offensive. And then the mayhem started. Stuff was sacked. Pieces were brought in for the attack. Look at that knight at e4. The knight at e4 is just beautiful. It can't be touched by any piece. You can't even sack an exchange for the knight because of the e3 pawn blocking it. It protects the c3 pawn. It threatens the king. It does everything you can need it to do. The queen at e5 is completely central. Black's position just looks great. Oh, and black's king is completely safe. Also a nice bonus. So we see bringing in more pieces into the attack. d4 coming in at just the right time. Even though it looks like white's all piled up for the c-pawn, here comes his brother, the d-pawn, up to help him out. Rook comes over, and then just d3. And again, just look at the position. Complete madness. Who knows what's going on? I'm guessing black's better. Black actually is better, even though he's down a rook. Just complete craziness. And then the game quickly ended in a mad dash where white ended up just completely getting mated. So yeah, that was my round 2 game. Very exciting. Very nice to finish. Again, like I said, after the game, everybody came up to me telling me how I was losing, apparently. But, hey, engines liked it. I think it was totally practical, whether they liked it or not. So, hey, sometimes you just got to put on your big boy pants and go after your opponent. Especially if you want to win tournaments, you need to know how to put the pressure on people and how to go and get what you want. And this was definitely one of those games. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the game. I know I did. And tune in for round 3. Round 3 was also pretty nice, as a very nice finish to round 3. And so, yeah, look forward to that. If you haven't seen round 1, I'll try to post a link in the description. And, yeah, I hope you guys are having a good time. I'm going to end the broadcast right about now.